whoa, 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 yeah, we are in the place to be. Yeah, 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 yeah,
All right, good morning, everyone. Kirk Anderson here with the Kirk Anderson Show, and I want to welcome you to drydenwire.com. And today I have a very special guest. He's become a good friend of mine in a variety of settings. But Neil Kline is here on behalf of an organization he started, and that is Family Friendly Workspaces. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I wanted to start off the show by just asking you to talk a little bit about who you are and where you're from, and just kind of give us a little introduction into how you got interested in this family-friendly workspace genre, because it's kind of unique.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a Polk County boy. I grew up in Milltown, went to Unity there in Balsam Lake, and ultimately after Unity went off to UW-Madison for school and kind of bounced around a little bit before coming back to Osceola, where I live now. And family-friendly workplaces kind of started out of some connections I had from some previous jobs, and in particular a gentleman named Mark Tyler out of Woodville who started his own manufacturing company. Really believed in working to try and start a program that promotes family friendliness, not only as a way to help families and children, but also as a way to try and address the workforce challenges we're facing. And it's kind of one of those things where sometimes you get a job and you just kind of fall into it, and it's suddenly a really good fit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened here. I started working part-time for him, and then actually a year ago, in July, so I've been working a year and a couple weeks now. I started full-time, and so it's been a great experience. I've really loved doing it.
So part of the intro that I posted on on the Dryden Wire page was that we were going to talk about how to attract new employees, or make your business and your community more attractive and vibrant, and I think that's what kind of attracts me to this as a mayor. For those of you who maybe don't know, I'm the mayor of a small town in western Wisconsin, St. Croix Falls, and so we're constantly looking at ways to get people to come live, work, and play in our town. And some of the challenges that we face, you address. One is housing. Another one is just the workforce. We don't have enough people that work. But we have a unique situation where we're really close to the Twin Cities. We're less than an hour away, and so we have a lot of commuters that can come over, or they could just move over. But again, the housing and then making the places people can work more appealing. So that's kind of what got me excited about what you're doing, is you're addressing some of those things. And oddly enough, when we first met, you were working for Sheila Harsdorf, who was our senator at the time, and your most recent political move, even before that, you ran for assembly in Wisconsin. That was not a successful bid, but that opened up this opportunity. And then, of course, can't go without saying that you just have been appointed to the village board down in Osceola, Wisconsin.
Yep.
So what's that been like? Have you had a couple meetings under your belt now?
We got the first one down, and when I talked with the village board to kind of get that to talk about the appointment, one of the things that I really referenced is with Family Friendly, we're really focused on economic development. And as I kind of think through, there are folks out there who are struggling, and life is not always particularly easy for folks, and there's important conversations around what we should do to try and help people in that way. And it's kind of crass, but I kind of joke that, if you really want to help people, if you want to think about the thing that helps folks perform better across any kind of socioeconomic measure, it's money, it's income. If you have more income, you're probably more healthy, you might be higher educated, all of those things. Those are, of course, generalizations. It's not a rule by any means.
Right.
But as I look at family friendly and I look at service in the, on the Osceola Village board or anywhere else, I think that one of the important things that governments and society generally needs to be focused on is how do we try to increase the amount of money that's sloshing around?
Yeah.
Because that's how people can ultimately help themselves.
Sure.
And so family-friendly workplaces ties into that, because what we're really focused on is making sure that we have a workforce that can help our local economy run smoothly, because that means we're taking full advantage of the economic opportunity that's available to us. And so I think that the service on the board, family-friendly workplaces, housing, childcare, all of these issues that I think sometimes we talk about individually, I really want us to start talking about them and seeing the connections between them, because it's really about making sure that folks have the opportunity to create the life that they want for them and their family, because they know how to do that, and we can help make those conditions.
So as part of that, we as a community strive to have better businesses and bring new employers, manufacturers, retail, those types of things. That can always be a challenge because any planning that goes on has to go through a planning commission, has to be approved by a board, and that can take a long time. Ben asked a question about housing. He said, isn't there an apartment building being built in Osceola somewhere? That was something that you kind of came in at the tail end of, but it addresses a lot of what we're talking about, which is providing housing for the workforce. And so, yes, Osceola just passed, their board just passed a building project for the old hospital in Osceola, which has been an eyesore for, I don't know if it's been more than 10 years.
Long time.
It's a long time, but it's going to be torn down, and there'll be a 90-plus unit apartment building that it's struggled to get through some things because there's always opposition. Somebody's view is going to be blocked, or someone doesn't want it in their backyard, and it's the same thing that we struggle with in St. Croix Falls and Amory, and every city has that same challenge. But I'm excited for that. So maybe you could just broach why that's important, how a new apartment building can free up housing too. Like,
Sure.
what's kind of the idea behind that?
Yeah, well, I'll give kind of a long answer because I think it's kind of a multi-part situation. So from a workforce perspective, when we think about housing, if workers don't have a place to live within a reasonable distance of where they want to work, then it's very hard for them to take that job. And I'll just kind of tell a story to illustrate that. So there was an employer down in Baldwin that we know of who had thought that they'd solved their workforce shortage because they found a company that would recruit folks from kind of the southern U.S., like I think Georgia or something.
Oh.
Presumably they showed them the area in the summertime, not in the middle of a blizzard, but they found, I think, 10 folks who were willing to move up from Georgia to come and work at this place. And the deal was, you'll move up here, we'll pay for 3 months of housing, we'll put you up in a hotel, and during those 3 months you can try and find a place to live. And what ended up happening is at the end of those 3 months, they only had one employee left. And it was because nobody could find a place that they could live in. And so I think sometimes when we talk about housing, I really want to make sure that we connect housing and the workforce, because those two things are really important issues. In the Osceola case, that building is not necessarily strictly workforce housing. It's going to be market priced apartments from everything I understand. And the role that can play is that in Polk County in particular, Terry Hauer at Polk EDC did a really important housing study to look at the housing challenges we face and to think through how we should approach trying to address that shortage.
Right.
And the key thing that this project will do is it will give a space in the community for seniors to go. And that's one of the things that the developers particularly focused on. And the reason that's important is because there's a fair number of seniors who are continuing to live in single-family homes. And if they want to do that, by all power to you. Live where you want to live.
They maybe lived there for 40 years.
Exactly.
Right.
But if you're ready to downsize and you want to stay in your community, we need options for you to be able to do that. And I think that this apartment building fits that need. The plus side of that then is that means we're going to begin hopefully freeing up some single family homes.
Right.
And if you think about, the number of bedrooms in a house, you can kind of think about how efficiently a region or area is using its housing stock. And right now, the way that our housing is being used, there are a fair number of bedrooms that perhaps aren't being used
Right.
quite the way that they could be.
They're now sewing rooms or
Or a
crossword
guest
puzzle
room, or
rooms.
whatever it might be. And that's great if you want to stay in that situation. But if you want to downsize and you want to stay in the community, which I want to see seniors stay in the community,
Right.
then this is an avenue for you to do that while opening up single family homes for families to come in and move into.
Yeah, I think that's a unique thing. So I do firefighting and first responding. So there are many times that I get called to houses for elderly people who have fallen or are not feeling well or whatever it is. And when I get to that place, I'll have conversations with some of them and ask them if they've ever considered downsizing so that they don't have two sets of stairs to get to the bathroom or to their bedroom or whatever. And I've heard it time and time again that there are challenges of getting out of a house because there isn't a place for them to go. And Polk County has public housing that is for seniors. And so in St. Croix Falls, we have 3 or 4 different buildings that are designated for senior housing. Now, when my dad was looking to get some additional help with his health, we looked at getting him into one of the nicer places that were just 3 blocks from our house. I made some calls and I was told, I'm sorry, he has too many assets. He worked too hard. He has a retirement from Ford. He was in the Air Force for 25 years. He has Social Security, has some stocks. He doesn't qualify to be in senior housing. And I thought, well, that's crazy. I could help him. He would be right down the road. My kids could visit him. And he had to go to a private or semi-private place in Minnesota with a very high rent, and they had the amenities and things that they needed, but he was not qualified to go any place in Polk County. They're anywhere near anyway. And so it's been my goal to create some kind of senior housing option that is not dependent on you being, kind of in a tough spot financially, because many of those people they do own those homes, and so they say we can't move out. There's no place for us to move that we could get assistance because we own our house, and once we sell it, we have assets, and then we're disqualified.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an interesting problem to have. But what I would like to really see is a private entity that you can pay your rent to be in and have some amenities, and it's senior housing. And that's what we've been trying to do here in St. Croix Falls. And it's been really challenging since the interest rates went up so high, because now builders are saying, we could build this, but the price is now this, and the rent will be over $2,000. And so that's really puts it unaffordable for a lot of people. So kind of an interesting thing to do. So as we get into this discussion and we talk about this, some people who may be watching, there's a few people that are watching live. This isn't just for employers. We're talking to employees. This is something that this idea of a family-friendly workplace, you can bring this to your employer. Absolutely. And say, hey, I heard this guy on Dryden Wire. He talked about ways to build your workforce, which is a challenge, and kind of make it family-friendly. You should check him out. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. We'll try and answer them as part of the show. But if you're an employer, this is very important for you too to consider. There's several employers within Polk County and other counties, but I'm in Polk County, that have taken up this mantle and saying, we want this accreditation. You get some kind of a plaque or something to put up that says we're family friendly. That's always nice. Yeah. But it also it raises the bar for you to say, here's some goals that we want to set. So feel free to ask questions. If you're an employer or an employee, this is information that will be interesting for you. And I have to say thank you to Ben Dryden for letting me do a show on his platform. And I also want to make sure that I reference Rhett Bozen, who is our sponsor. So we're just going to take a quick 15-second break to take a look at Rhett's video, and then we'll be back to talk more about family-friendly workplaces.
Are you ready for a new cell phone or cellular service provider? Rhett Bozen's an AT&T authorized retailer and is ready to get you connected. Skip the store and get personalized support at your business or home. Call Rhett today at 715-771-3535.
All right, thanks for that, and thanks for Rhett, who is working with a cool company called Bug Tussle. They're kind of out on the western or the eastern edge of Wisconsin, but they're moving westward. But he's also an AT&T representative, and if you're tired of going to the store and trying to figure out plans with someone who really is just trying to sell you a plan to make their cut, and they've got a lot of things going on, and you're kind of the distraction in the room, you can get one-on-one attention from Rhett, who is a fantastic individual, and he will come to you, or you can do all the discussions over the phone, and he'll make it happen through AT&T. All right, so Neil, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Again, we kind of talked a little about the housing and things like that. Tell me a little bit about how you are looking at data to kind of bring about this idea of increasing the workforce here in Wisconsin, and some of the things that you've learned through doing some research.
Yeah, well, I think one of the key points that we always make with Family Friendly is that we face a long-term human resources shortage in Wisconsin, and that's a really important thing, I think, for folks to understand and really see. So I've got actually a couple of slides, and maybe we'll put the first one up here, because no talk would be complete without some slides.
Right, yeah.
So indulge me while we talk about this. So the slide that you see up here is one that shows Wisconsin's statewide net workforce entrance. And before your eyes glaze over, because that sounds really boring, I want to just explain what this slide means. The way that you calculate this number is you take the number of 65 to 69-year-olds who are leaving the workforce in a given year, so they're retiring.
Retires, yeah.
And then you subtract that number out of the number of 15 to 19-year-olds who are coming in. So you got the folks coming in and the folks going out, and that gives you this net entrance number. This, again, is for statewide, and I've got my color commentary there around 2030, yikes, because the point that I really make here is that 129 souls that you see on that slide, there aren't any missing zeros there. We haven't scaled the chart in any way. In 2030, Wisconsin statewide is projected to add 129 souls to its workforce, which is bonkers.
Two things come to mind. Yes, that's crazy. One is the price of wages, that people are raising their pricing to accommodate wages. It's very expensive these days to do just about anything to get people to come to work for them. So you can go to Walmart now, and where everybody was arguing for that $15 minimum wage, they're paying well over 15 into sometimes $20+ just to get people to come in and grocery shop for that delivery service. The other thing is, you said 69. I've got a long time in the workforce to go, which is a little bit scary. So, but as we look at 2030, 129 people swapping out, that's a really low number.
It's an extremely low number, and there are a couple things that really feed into this, and this is some demographic detail that I think is important. So there really are kind of two factors that play into the challenge that you see on that slide. The first is that baby boomers are retiring. They're a big generation. We've known that they would be retiring for some time, obviously, because everyone eventually phases out of the workforce. But that retirement was really actually accelerated because of COVID. Asset values were up, so folks could afford to retire, and folks didn't want to get sick. And so they left. There were about 2 million extra retirements than we would have normally expected to see nationally during COVID. And so that's a huge contributing factor to that problem. The second is that we're not having very many kids. And I think that dynamic really means that we're not replacing people at quite the rate we normally would expect to.
Right.
And so when you look at birth rates, or a fertility rate, right, the number of children that women are having on kind of a population-wide basis, we're below, it's kind of morbid, but 2.1 is the number of kids you need to have to maintain, which makes sense because for every 2, you need 2 more.
Well,
We're at about
I
like
have to say,
1.6.
I have 5 kids.
So you've done your part.
I'm doing
Thank you.
I'm doing my part. And
The
more,
data
so.
appreciates you. Everybody else is
step it up.
is kind of underperforming that demographic baseline. Nationally, that means that you would need to have a conversation about immigration or something like that, because that would be the primary avenue to try and fill essentially the gap between births and the number of folks that we need to really have a strong economy.
And I think without getting too political, and Gay says good morning, our state
Morning, Gay.
representative, and so it's always nice. I think she's been a part of this too. She spoke at a housing forum recently that you were at as well. I think, without getting too political, when we talk about immigration, that's a hot button topic because the borders on the southern half of the United States are, open, or however you want to look at it. We've got a lot of people coming in, and we don't know who they are to a large degree. That can offset a lot, including the costs of doing business, whether they're legal or not. But it also changes the dynamics of your workforce. And not that that's a bad thing. I think that America is the melting pot of the world, and people come here for a reason. But it can mess with your data too, because you're probably not getting all the information from people who aren't reporting it on the census. So it's interesting that you talk about that, because there are a lot of people who are coming up and working, some of them legally and some of them off the books, and that probably throws off some of your
and I think the
including
point,
housing.
The point about immigration, and I agree, it is an important topic that I think the country is working to try and work through. The workforce, there are 2 points I'll make. The workforce shortage we face is not unique to Wisconsin. It's a national problem. The demographic factors I talked about are nationally, that's what's going on, and we're seeing that play out in Wisconsin's data. The other thing is immigration can be a tool for economic progress. And there's nothing wrong, in my view, and I'm speaking personally, in thinking about immigration in a way where how can we use it to strengthen the U.S. economy and create a system that does that. And right now, I would argue the current system is not taking that necessarily into account. It's very difficult for the current system to work effectively, but we can have a secure border, robust protections, all of those kinds of things, while also making sure that we are taking full advantage of the fact that people want to come here. This is America. It's not, this is a beacon and a place that people like.
Yeah.
And if we can figure out how to capitalize on that, we could help ourselves. That is far above and beyond family-friendly workplaces.
Right, yeah.
That is a huge challenge that I think we all kind of see and need to grapple with.
Yeah.
And there are important conversations around that. But
We'll come back another time for more.
yeah, we can set up a whole other show on that one.
We'll have Gay on as our guest.
Yeah.
All right. So data-wise, what do we do to fix the 135? Was that the number? Oops, going forward. 129 in like less than 7 years.
Yeah.
In 2025, we're at 592, so that's a little better, but it just keeps going down. And then in 2035, it spikes up. So, what's that data telling us?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a rebound. We don't rebound to the levels that we've seen historically. 2010 was something I think like 35,000 people or so, and so we don't get close to that place. But I think I've got a slide that shows the same data for our region of the state, and maybe we can kind of talk about this through this data slide, because I think it's really helpful. So family-friendly workplaces works primarily in St. Croix, Pierce, and Polk counties. We're very focused on that western Wisconsin piece. And so this data is net workforce entrance for those, for all of the counties that you see listed on the right-hand side. Calculated the same way. Folks going in, folks going out, this is what you see. So 2030 continues to serve as that low point. The 2 lines, the lighter colored blue and yellow line up top, that's St. Croix and Pierce County. In 2030, they're going to add about 200 people a year to their workforce. We can kind of, that's not enough. They face a similar labor shortage that's still very low, but they're performing differently from Polk, Barron, and Burnett. And I've brought those 3. Polk obviously is in our service area, but Barron and Burnett and Polk, you'll see they're below 0.
Yeah.
So that means that more people are leaving the workforce than coming in, and the workforce then is shrinking, right? The number of available workers is going down. And in Polk County's case, we dipped below 0 in 2015, and by 2030, we will have been shedding workers for about a decade and a half. Now, to your point, this slide does not include migration, right? This is just a demographic projection of the bodies that were available when this data was calculated.
But this is a symptom or proof of a symptom, I guess. When you go to get something at a store and nobody's there to help you, and you say, what, are kids lazy? Why aren't it, who's not going to work, whatever. It's not that we don't have kids working. It's that we don't have enough to replace the ones that have gone out, that have decided to leave the workforce. And there's too many jobs for how many kids or young people or middle-aged people, whatever it may be, that are there to replace it. So it's going to take you longer to get your French fries because there's not enough workers at McDonald's. It's going to take you longer to get that item at Walmart because there's not enough people stocking shelves. It's going to take you longer to design a building because there's not enough architects that are going into design. So it's not just the small things. It's actually the whole workforce. And so, from our perspective, like, I'm glad that St. Croix and Pierce on that slide look like they're doing well, but it's a graph. So the difference between Polk County and Pierce County is only a couple hundred.
Yeah.
That line's far above, but it's really just not that
It looks
big of a
like
deal.
kind of a big gap just visually, but 200 people a year is not very many.
That's...
one way to think about that, that 200 number, right? If you're an employer and you're looking to hire, you are competing with everybody else for one of those 200 people.
Right.
That's a little simplified because you can recruit from outside St. Croix County. Someone might move to take the job. There's other things that make it not quite that stark.
Yeah.
But that's basically what that slide means. And if you're running a company, that's insanely hard to recruit in that environment. And to your point about wages and things, that would be upward pressure on wages for sure, because you're going to have to pay people more to get them in. Or from Family Friendly's perspective, you can also focus on benefits.
Right.
And say, what kind of benefits can I offer that might help distinguish me in the marketplace as we recruit folks? And we can kind of get into that when we talk about how we think we can address this problem. But that slide, and you can go back to that slide, I think, just to really drive the point home, that we really face a long-term human resources challenge, and we need to be thinking strategically about what we're going to do to address it.
Yeah.
And so that's really what Family-Friendly Workplaces is all about.
Well, a big example for my city is we have a regional medical center that we're a town of 2,500-ish, less than 2,500, but our regional medical center probably has 40,000 or more people from both Minnesota and Wisconsin, surrounding areas, before they start getting into another hospital's zone. And so they have a robust, very successful model, but providers are not interested in coming up here at the rate that we would like. We have positions available, but because they come up here and they go, oh, this is beautiful in the summer, they look around and they go, look at the river, the trails, the fun things that are out here, the lakes, but where are we going to live? And so they go, we want a certain quality of home, a certain, whatever it may be, and they're not able to find that. And so it's hard to recruit people to come up here, whether you're the CEO of a major business or someone who wants to bring a 100-person company up here, but they need 100 people to fill those spots. It's really hard to say, hey, we've got an empty space in our industrial park. You could build a beautiful facility, but we don't have any workers. So maybe robots? So that's the challenge that I think that a lot of people are facing.
Well, and automation, I think there's an anxiety that automation is going to take away jobs from folks. I would argue automation is more likely to fill jobs that people are struggling to fill because of the tight labor market that we're seeing. And I know that this is kind of a wonky conversation to have, but I think it really helps explain some of what folks are experiencing now, because this tight labor market, and again, with the long-term shortage that we're facing, many of the pressures and experiences that folks are having today is kind of a taste of what the next section of time is really going to be like, because we aren't going to have the people that we need. and it's going to change how the labor market behaves. It's going to change how people experience working with companies, how people experience interacting in the economy. It's a really big deal.
So what are the benefits of Polk County being a border town to Minnesota and an hour from the Twin Cities? Is Terry Hauer looking to recruit people from the cities to come up here to work? Is that part of the Economic Development Corporation's goals, is to fill the workspace from other communities? Or, what's the plan?
Sure. Well, maybe we can go, actually, I've got a slide, nice segue into the plan slide, of what we really want to see us do in the area. So again, this is net workforce entrance data for the counties we work in and kind of the surrounding area. And we break it out into these 3 time frames because we think that these time frames really help. Otherwise, you're trying to swallow an elephant, and that's just a really hard thing to do. So first off, you have that immediate term, which from an employer perspective is, how do I become more competitive in the marketplace today?
Right.
What can I do to distinguish myself? How can I get a stamp of excellence in the marketplace? And so that's that immediate term. Over the medium term, that's that talent attraction piece. How do we encourage folks to think about Western and Northwestern Wisconsin when they're thinking about where they want to move? What do they care about? How do we market ourselves to them? How do we make sure they know all the great stuff in summer and in the winter? Snowmobiling's great, and if you want to come do that, this is a place to come do that. So how do we message that to folks across the labor spectrum? Then over the long term, it's actually about early childhood. And how do we work with employers and work together to make sure that every child has the skills they need to enter the workforce on time and with the skills that they need to be successful? Those 3 time periods are really the key pieces of addressing the long-term workforce shortage that we face. And we can get into any one of those. I mean, I think that they're all very important components of the puzzle. To your question about talent attraction, we are very excited at Family Friendly to have received a $50,000 grant from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. And all of that money is being put towards, I feel kind of sheepish sometimes because I got a government grant to do a study, but here we are. We got a government grant to do a study. And that study actually I think is very important because we all know why we live here. What we don't know is why others may want to live here. We have ideas, perhaps, about what they care about, but we need much better data around particularly people who live over in the Twin Cities, not only in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but think of all of the suburbs around there. Think of the exurb counties around those suburbs. What do they care about, and how would we inform them about Western Wisconsin so that when they're making a decision, maybe their kid's going to enter middle school and they want to be settled by the time that happens. They live in Woodbury right now, but they want more space. What we want is when people begin thinking about where they want to move, we want Western Wisconsin to be on the list, and we want it to be up towards the top so that they look at us. Because I think when you come here, the place can sell itself. It's a wonderful place to live, but we need to tell people about it, and we need to make sure that they know that what we have is something that they want.
So do we need to do a better job of kind of promoting the amenities that we have in terms of school for the kids? Education's a big part of it, so really touting our schools and the quality of education. I know for my wife, an Aldi would be a big plus. Just FYI, if Aldi
Shout
happens
out
to be
to
watching,
Aldi
right?
if you're here.
And I hear that all the time, that an Aldi would be a great asset to the community. Better restaurants, things to do, places to your downtime. Have you ever thought about the fact that there are a lot of people post-COVID that are now working from home, but they're taking up residence here? I know several people that have moved here, but they still have jobs in the cities, and they are working for Medtronic, Target, whatever it may be, remotely. And so that's not necessarily helping our workforce. It's maybe hurting us in the sense that they're taking up some housing for potential workforce. And welcome to our community. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there's kind of a range. So you mentioned the Target example, right? My boyfriend, he and I work from our house. He works for Target. And so we felt very welcome to the community, so thank you for that. But I think that the point being, having folks work here is still a benefit. because they're paying taxes, they're sending their kids to school,
Right.
you know, they're buying local, all of that is still good.
Yep.
It would be sweet if they also worked here, you know,
Right.
but you can kind of begin thinking about it kind of like a tiered system, right? The most unhelpful situation is you don't live here and you don't work here.
Right.
Another level would be you work here but you live in Minnesota. Then the reverse of that, and then you live and work here.
Right.
Maybe is kind of a way to
And
conceptualize.
it goes both ways. I mean, we have a lot of people that travel from Wisconsin to the cities
Yeah.
to work and vice versa. So
Yep.
there is a crossover. I think a number of years ago there was some tax benefits that were kind of on the brink because Minnesota's governor and Wisconsin's governors couldn't agree on some things. So there was a little bit of a hubbub there. My wife did say yes, Aldi, and I'm not alone. So we do have a contingent of people that continue to ask.
We can
for that.
start the movement here.
That's right. But if if you are living in an apartment, the apartment is potentially paying property taxes, but it would be better if you were living in a house so that you were paying property taxes too. Certainly, the buy local movement is a huge deal to help stimulate the economy and keep money in your local your local city. And there's evidence that shows if you spend your money at a mom and pop shop, it recycles through the community several times versus if you shop at a big box store and it just goes to whatever city they're located in. So I think there's some benefits to that. What else can we look for to boost this? And
Sure.
you tell me. I'll let you lead the discussion here.
Well, I think that one of the key things is that, you know, you talked about schools, right? When you look at Wisconsin schools relative to Minnesota schools, they are both pretty strong institutions. Wisconsin public schooling, I'm a product of public education. I know there's a lot of folks who are. Schools, from an attraction perspective, aren't necessarily a particularly big differentiator because it's kind of true in both places, right? It can be true in Minnesota and true here. The same with, let's say, you know, folks say they want proximity to nature. Well, Wisconsin's got a lot of walking trails. We've got, you know, the Ice Age Trail, the Gandy Dancer, like there's all kinds of options for that. Well, Minnesota does too. So what this study, and you asked a good question, and frankly, that's why we're doing the study, is because we need to know, like, okay, the table stakes, I want good schools, I want affordable housing, I want childcare, whatever those things are. Those are table stakes. What are the differentiating things? What are the decision points for you when you're deciding? Is it tax rates? Is it cost of living? Is it access to medical care? You know, what are you really focused on? And then also understanding different people want different stuff. So if you're a white collar worker who works from home, what you're interested in might be different if you're a manufacturer, you know, working on the shop floor. And I think we need to have a better understanding of what folks want so that we can begin to look at ourselves and say, well, we have that and we have that and we have that. Let's talk about these things because now we know that these will impact people.
For a company that is in Polk County versus a company that's in Ramsey County or St. Paul, the wage difference has to be corresponding to the cost of living. I would assume you're going to make more if you live in St. Paul than if you live and work in Polk County. But then also you have to take into account that it's probably cheaper to live in Polk County than it is to live in St. Paul. So how much do wages matter to prospective employees, and how much can an employer afford to entice people? I've seen some signs around town, you know, starting up to $31 an hour. Even just to be a school bus driver right now, they're up over $30 an hour to be a school bus driver. When I was a school bus driver in college, it was $7.50, you know, and so and now that's like a day rate. They have a flat fee for a day rate, but if you just break it out by how long it takes to get your route done, it ends up being over $30 an hour. That's an incredible increase, but that means that someone's got to pay for that. So what can an employee afford versus what can an employee expect? And how does that factor into like drawing people across the border or to get back into the workforce?
Yeah, well, I think I'll take that first by saying that I think, you know, what an employer can afford from a wage perspective varies from employer to employer. And a lot of that has to do with how an employer approaches human resources. Are you focused on being the highest paying firm in the area?
Right.
If you are, then that wage point is going to be really important, and you're
Yeah.
going to have to make sure you're really competitive with that. Our point with Family Friendly is that obviously wages are important. No one works for free. But a job is about much more than a wage, too. You can get a lot of additional benefits that enrich your life in meaningful ways from a job. Do you have time off? Do you have a robust healthcare benefit? Are they, supportive of you when Timmy is sick and you need to run home? Are they flexible with you? All of those kinds of things can be huge factors
Yeah.
in why people take a job or keep a job.
We kind of found that out with COVID, where your kid was exposed to someone and you had to take 15 days off of work.
Yeah.
It was a little rough on some parents who were like, I don't have all this time off, and I think that we were forced to deal with it. But so childcare is another big part. You had mentioned that if you're going to enter the workforce and you're not choosing to stay at home as a stay-at-home mom or dad, you have to have a place to put kids. And I know around our area, it's like a waiting list to get into any type of daycare.
Yeah.
And so there's a need there as well. Are you advocating that the employer provide daycare or some kind of childcare, or that it just becomes part of something that the community offers, in the sense of we're going to make this a better place to live, work, and play?
Sure. Well, that's a huge topic, but I think it's a super important one. And I'll just kind of summarize. I'll get into it by first saying, it is an economically rational decision to look at how much money you're going to make in a job and look at childcare expenses. And many people do this and say, it doesn't make sense for me to work.
Right.
And that is a real thing that people are making decisions based off of. And I think we need to be honest about that the childcare shortage is a workforce problem, and it is contributing in some ways to the shortage that we're facing. Now, the conversation about what to do about it is a hugely expensive one, and one that I think there's a lot of different avenues that we can take to try and address it. From Family Friendly's perspective, we really encourage employers. Some employers are starting to just offer childcare outright. They tend to be much larger. So, for example, Quick Trip down in La Crosse, they have built a childcare center for their corporate staff, and you can go to the childcare. I don't know how it all works, but that's one of the benefits of working at Quick Trip down in La Crosse.
Interesting.
That is extremely expensive to do, and not always an option for folks. One thing, though, that employers can do, and actually OEM Fabricators in Woodville is an example of this, they contribute to what's called a Dependent Care Flexible Spending Account. And so it's a tax-advantaged account, and without getting into kind of the details of how tax-advantaged accounts work, it's basically like an HSA, and that money can be used to pay for care costs for dependents. So that includes children, but also elderly relatives.
Oh, okay.
Which is really cool, and I think points
Become
out
more and more.
that family doesn't just mean kids. Family means grandma and grandpa too, and they can require help sometimes. So that's one avenue. I do think that ultimately childcare is going to end up in a place where we're going to have to braid funding, right? Employers are increasingly appreciating that there's maybe a role for them to play. I do think government will have to become involved in some way, just because the problem is so big.
Neil, the government never fixes anything.
It doesn't help, and I acknowledge that, but I think that we've got a challenge there that we need to work to try and address. But I think that there are some really cool, exciting things. For example, down in Ellsworth, there's kind of a community project going to try and bring a lot of employers together to create the critical mass that you need for childcare. Because really the problem with childcare, and to your point about government involvement, I think this points out well that it's not always helpful. The childcare market is fundamentally really kind of broken. When you look at the costs to run a childcare center, they are far more than what you can reasonably expect to make.
Right.
And when you're in that situation, it's a failed market, and it's a really challenging place to be in. There was a lot of conversation in the last state budget about putting money towards childcare counts, I believe is what the program was called. And while that was an important thing for the childcare sector, I personally, that's a bit like putting a Band-Aid on it, because fundamentally the market doesn't work well.
Right.
And that's a gnarly problem, and I don't have an answer to that. From Family Friendly's perspective, what we do is we really encourage employers to step into that space and begin thinking about, what can I do to help my employees with childcare?
Right.
Maybe it's helping defray costs. Maybe it's partnering with other employers to make a center together.
Right.
What can we do to try and address this
I think
this
it's
challenge?
like Quick Trip is doing that for their corporate office, which I can understand, because there's probably a mass amount of people in a building, and you can bring your kids and they go downstairs to the daycare center. But that doesn't help the people that are working at Quick Trips.
Yeah.
And so that's, there's probably a large contingent of stay-at-home or of parents who say, I think we need 2 incomes. And as my kids get into college, my wife and I have decided to, that she would step into the workforce just on a part-time basis in a very flexible job, which has been really, something that's been good for her personally, but also it helps with the financial aspect of just raising 5 kids. If that was something that if we were dependent on childcare, and let's, just throw out a number, let's say she makes $20 an hour. And so if she's making $20 an hour, if she worked full-time, that would be $40,000 approximately, right? But she's only working part-time, so that's $20,000. If we had to put our kids into some kind of a childcare, that would eat up most of that money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very expensive. Now, luckily, we don't have kids that are that young, but if you wanted to work in the workforce and bring your kid to a daycare place where you paid them per day and you had multiple kids, you would have to make lots of money to offset. And then you're talking about, you have to buy clothing. Maybe it's a professional setting. You have to buy some nice clothing. Gas to get there, very expensive right now. A car and the mileage that it's going to take. And you start adding it up. A lot of people say, I can't afford to work because I can't afford childcare and all these other expenses. I'm actually going to lose money.
Yeah.
And you feel busy. So Ben asked a good question. It said, would it be better to pay more or provide more of the benefits you're referencing? So what do you think about that?
Well, I think I might do a little bit of a lawyer dodge on you there, Ben, but I think it depends on how your company is approaching recruiting. So one of the corporate sponsors that we work with is J.A. Counter-Alera out of New Richmond. And there are different approaches to take towards recruitment. If you want to be the highest paying employer, you can do that. And it might look, that might work for you, it might not work for you. I really believe that particularly after COVID, I think folks have thought more about what they want out of life, how they want to balance life. And I think that if, in our view, and in my personal view, if you're a company that can, obviously you got to pay people, you can't pay them dirt. And I kind of reject the idea that there's a trade-off between pay and benefits. I think these two things can complement each other really well. If you've got a place that will support you and your kids, if you've got a place that will let you run off, you want to get to Timmy's T-ball game, you want to be home when the kids are off the bus, if you've got a place that allows you to do that, that creates a lot of loyalty and a lot of goodwill. And I think that is a really powerful recruitment tool for employees, because they can look and they can say, well, maybe I'm not quite making as much as I could make if I went somewhere else, but geez, I can make it to every doctor appointment. I never miss anything. I'm home when when the kids are home. All of that, that's a huge deal.
Right.
And I think that folks really value that. And if a company really wants to move in that direction, that can be a really important recruitment tool for folks to use.
So what, we're coming to the end of our time. Give us like an overview of, you go to talk to XYZ employer and you say, I'm from family-friendly workplaces. I want to encourage you to look at this. What is it that makes a family-friendly workplace? Like, give us the summary of your elevator pitch for your it's not a product, I guess, but it's a certification or acknowledgement. So give us the spiel so that people know what we're talking about.
We call it a certification. And the way that we evaluate a company is on the basis of our matrix. And so what we do is we ask an employer to tell us the benefits that they offer in a couple of different places. One is healthcare. The other is time off. We ask a couple questions around early childhood and child care, what kind of support you provide, and then kind of a basket of extra stuff that maybe you wouldn't think of. Do you connect your employees to community resources? So for example, there's the Family Resource Center in Baldwin. It's a parent education, kind of a family-centered nonprofit organization. if you have a connection to them and you refer, when an employee is expecting a kid, kids don't come with instruction manuals, right? And so if you're helping employees get connected to community resources, that's strengthening families. That's worth some points on our matrix. And so the way that it works is you go through our matrix, and you can see it on our website, familyfriendlyworkplaces.org. It's up there. And so you go through and you tell us the benefits that you offer, and each one of those benefits has a point value. So at the end of that, we add those points up, and that tells us if you're gold, silver, or bronze in our rating and our kind of ranking scheme that we've got. On the back end, then, what you get is you become a certified family-friendly workplace. You can use our logo basically however you'd like to in recruitment and retention. Put it on your website, put it on job postings. We've got swag. I've got coffee mugs. I've got yard signs. We got all kinds of stuff. Car window clings.
I've seen the yard sign.
Yeah,
Local business.
it's out and about. And so the whole point there is to give you an independent third-party marketplace credential. It's a stamp of excellence that then you can use when you're talking to prospective employees or current employees to communicate really, I think, a cultural value, which is really what this certification shows, that as a company, you care about families and you're interested in helping families, the families of your employees. And that can be a huge driver of retention and recruitment.
So is there a cost to apply to this or to be a part of it? Or how do you get paid, like as an organization that pays your bills?
Yeah, so there are kind of two parts to that. So from if you're becoming certified as family friendly, we do assess what we call a conduit contribution. And what that is an annual contribution to a 501c3 nonprofit of the employer's choice. The only rule is that nonprofit must support families. So for example, Kurt's Widgets gets certified. We assess that conduit contribution. You send us a check for whatever that contribution is, and then 100% of that donation flows on to the family supporting nonprofit that you told us to send it to. That conduit contribution right now, we're up to about $18,000 a year flowing through us, which we're very excited about. We're up to 30 full-time or 30 certified employers. So we've seen really robust growth. We, family friendly then, obviously, we don't keep any of that conduit contribution, and we don't run off pixie dust. It costs money to do stuff. We really rely on private donations and corporate sponsors. So OEM, Bremer, Excel, Crum Exteriors, Cage Innovation, and JA Counter are all corporate sponsors of family friendly workplaces and really help support our operating costs, to get me around, to pay me, to do all the stuff that we need to do.
Okay, cool. So if an employee wants to encourage their employer to take a look at this, or someone else, maybe they get shared this and they watch it and they go, I want to do a family-friendly workplace, how do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, well, I think there might be a slide with my contact information. So there's how you can get in touch with me, but also our website, familyfriendlyworkplaces.org. You can go there, you can learn a lot about the certification program, you can see the matrix that we use, and you can get in touch with me that way as well. But please pick up the phone, send an email, whatever is easiest for you to get in touch, because ultimately, especially around talent attraction and helping early childhood, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so the more folks who are participating, the more we're able to really develop a reputation for Western Wisconsin as being the premier destination to come to raise your kids and have a family. And that ties into that talent attraction piece. It ties into early childhood. It ties into your own recruitment and retention.
Yeah, as part of being, the mayor of a city in Wisconsin, I look to partner with a variety of different people. One of the big people that I call when a business wants to come into town is, Terry over at the Polk County Economic Development Corporation, both to say, are there any funds available to help this individual offset some of his costs for startup, or if he's going to build, to do that. And then also, because he works with you, encouraging employers to take a look at how they can take part in what you're doing to make it more of a family-friendly workplace, both for their marketing and attraction of employees, but also just for the retention. And so I really appreciate that. And I had Neil come and speak to our city council about this a number of months ago, and I think it hit a really good spot. It did encourage us to look at ways to build housing One of my previous guests was Missa Jones, who has a tiny house community and is providing 16 spaces for people that want to live in a tiny house. And that's going to do some attracting of things around St. Croix Falls, because it's kind of an up and coming fun way for people to live, and it's got quite a following on a national and world stage. And then we also have been looking at ways to get housing development with side-by-side 1, 2, and 3 bedroom homes. And we have that kind of in the works right now in an area that will provide approximately 40 workforce single-family homes at both market rate, and it would kind of be marketed towards veterans and elderly, and then anybody who needs a space. So that would be 40 new homes within our city. Osceola has the 90-plus apartment building that, if a bunch of the retirees said, oh, we want to move into the apartment and not shovel snow anymore, then those single-family homes will open up, and things like that. So it just is kind of this rolling thunder of things that we're all trying to work together on. So I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Sharing your vision and your ideas. If you are interested in connecting with Neil, I'll put this up here. You can screen capture that one more time. The website is familyfriendlyworkplaces.org with an S at the end. And I'll just close by saying thank you again for being here. Don't forget to check out Rhett Bozen, 715-771-3535 for all your phone accessory needs or plans. And again, thank you to Ben Dryden for allowing us to have our show on your platform. And everyone have a great day. Thank you.